Hi friend, I am so excited and grateful that you purchased my Everyday Details card class. I'm really proud of the cards that I have designed for this class. I really love how they turned out, and they are chock full of different techniques and tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you throughout the class. There are 6 cards in total. If you have purchased the card kit in the mail, along with the pre-cut card bases, you'll also have pre-cut dies, you'll have your ribbon, your embellishments, and you'll have half a package of designer series paper. If you have purchased the PDF tutorial and this video demonstration for the class, if you don't have the Everyday Details bundle, you can certainly improvise and use different stamps and dies for your card making. In these cards, you're going to discover I'm sharing lots of tips, tricks, and techniques with you as well. There's paper piecing using water painters with our inks, some sponging techniques, there's a fun fold, there's all different things scattered throughout these 6 cards in this class. I hope you have a lot of fun putting your cards together. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and I am very excited to jump right on in and start stamping with you. This is the Everyday Details stamp set, and we have the bouquet of flowers, the teapot, the bird's nest, and there are 3 sentiments. You make every day a little brighter, overjoyed for you in this new journey, wishing you so much joy on this special day, and these fun little decorative dots. And then the dies are super versatile. As you can tell, even though they come as a bundle, it's not like they're die cuts that go around the images in any of these in this stamp set, but instead will work for so many cards and projects despite the stamp set you're using. But of course, when you buy it as a bundle, you save 10%, and who doesn't like to save money? We all love to save money, right? So I am really loving these dies. I have some extra die cuts that you can see with the holes perforated around them. We've got the vellum. It cuts all different sizes of the circles and the rectangles, and of course the sentiment overjoyed for you in this new journey fits in this one perfect. So I have really been happy with this purchase, and I am really excited to show you the cards. So let's jump into card number 1. Card number 1, simple and pretty. And I realized after I designed it, I'm like, why did I cut these out when I could have used one of the rectangle dies? But it was quick, it was simple, and I'm actually glad I didn't, because I think if these were all done with the die cuts, it would have taken away from the dots around this circle. It would have been too much. So I do like that straight edge without the dots around it, so that I just have it on the circle. Okay, so easy peasy. Let's pull in the supplies. Those of you who received card kits in the mail, you're gonna have all the pieces like this pre-cut and ready to go inside your envelope. You'll also have a full bolt of ribbon, which is the beautiful gold and vanilla ribbon, and you'll also have a full package of our cork embellishments, which I'm really enjoying. All right, so we have our basic white card base. Give that a good crease, and you're definitely going to need dimensionals. We use them a lot in this class, so I am going to just grab a full fresh sheet. All right. Oh, I should show you the paper. Hang on. The paper is the Poetic Expressions 12 by 12 paper from our mini catalog, and the colors in this paper are Boho Blue, Bubble Bath, Lost Lagoon, Moody Mauve, Mossy Meadow, and Wild Wheat. So those are all the ink pads we're going to be using in the class as well. I simply just pulled those colors out of the paper and decided that that was the color scheme I was going to use for all the cards. So here's the beautiful paper. The color combination is so gorgeous together. When I was showing Brian the cards that I made, he's like, oh, those are great colors for Easter. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right, they are. Perfect colors for Easter and spring. Like, just look how beautiful those colors are together. And the patterns are really, really nice. And that's it. That's a really beautiful package of Designer Series paper. And those of you who received the card kits in the mail, of course, you can change things up, or even those of you who have just purchased the PDF and video tutorial option. Of course, you can change up the paper, the patterns, the colors, and just use the layouts. This one's going to be my middle piece. I'm going to put that one on first so that I can center the other two around it. So I'm just going to put that right about here. This layout would also be beautiful using Christmas paper and Christmas stamps. Any seasonal paper, of course, you can make a whole beautiful set of these just using this one layout. Now I'm going to take my tear and tape, and I'm actually just going to put it on the inside. Okay. And I'm just going to position that right on top, flip it over, and then I'm going to take a glue dot and I might have too much on there, which I do. So I'm just going to put a glue dot right there because I know my circle is going to go right here, so that's going to hide my my ends. And I didn't need this much. I didn't really think that through when I was pulling it over. But I'm going to save this because I can use this for another card. So nothing is going to waste. Okay, I'm going to take another glue dot and put it right on top here. And, oops, let's make sure that's straight. There we go. Okay, there's our card base done. I've gone ahead and I have cut out the circle from Boho Blue, and that was using this die right here. For the most part in today's video, the die cuts are already done. There's a few I'll do during the class, but just to save some time, already done. Now you will maybe notice paper really gets stuck in these dies. So super handy to have your take your pick tool, or my little, where's my brush for popping things out? Hang on. This right here is handy. Now we don't sell these like this anymore. Instead you can get one of these, which is a tip you can put on your take your pick tool, which I still need to get. I just haven't yet because I have this. But see, look how quick and easy. It just pops them right out. And same thing with your die cuts. If you have any little bits and pieces that you need to pop out from your die cut, like look how fast. So if you don't have one of these handy dandy awesome tools, if you don't have your take your pick tool, I recommend one of these, and I recommend getting the bit that fits on top of these, because my goodness, time saver. And of course these little circle bits, yeah, they are all over the floor, but that's fine. That's what the vacuum's for later. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put this onto my card, and I am going to use dimensionals for that as well. I'm gonna put 3. These little things get everywhere as well, don't they? Oh my gosh, they get on the bottom of our socks, or on the animals, I'm telling you, they have traveled with me. I went to my aunt's, who lives on the mainland near Vancouver, and I went to stay with her for a little bit, and I went to unpack, and didn't I have one of these on the floor in the guest room. Somehow it traveled all the way from Nova Scotia to BC. I'll never forget that. I'm like, those damn things, you just can't get rid of them, I'm telling ya. You're going to use the smallest circle die next, which is this little guy right here. And I'm going to glue that onto my blue portion. Such a simple card, but the layout is just, I love it. And of course you can make this a portrait card as well. Have some tea. All right. There's a scrap bit of white cardstock in the kits to stamp the teacup on. So I'm going to do that next. I am using Stays On ink throughout the entire class because I am going to be using my water painter. If you don't have a water painter, you can use a paintbrush. If that's not your jam, you can color with your Stampin' Blends and use your black Memento instead, because that's the ink you need for stamping your blends. Coloring with your blends. Stays On won't work when you're coloring with blends. And I'm also going to be using the blender pen with the ink pads a lot, so I just decided to use my Stays On. So I'm not going to clean that because I know I'm going to be using that again with the Stays On in the class. Time for coloring. So these are the water painters. I'm sure most of you have seen them. They come in a set of 3. So you have your wide bristles, and then you have your medium bristles, and then more of your fine tip bristles. I would recommend using either or one of these today. Either will work. I've already put my water inside, so you're going to turn it counterclockwise, put it underneath the tap, put in your water, and then screw your lid back on. I have some paper towel. Coloring this way is one of my favorite things to do. I'm just squeezing the water out until it comes out in my brush. So I'm going to take my boho blue ink pad and tap it onto a clear block and pick my ink up that way. Get my water going again. Okay, and I like to squeeze some water out on my block too, and then just pick it up that way. So let me slide this into the camera better here for you. Okay, and you don't want your tip to be so fully loaded with water that you're going to make your paper bubble. Okay, so you just want to make sure you've got just enough water to float your color on, and just color it in. And once this layer dries, which it will dry pretty quickly because it's not fully loaded with ink, then pick up some more and then start adding more layers of the color. So relaxing, so much fun, and there's a little bit right here. And I want it to be darker around the handle. It's nice to get the variations of the light blue. With the dark blue, you can leave a little bit of white in there, which I'm going to do, but I do want to add a little bit more up here. And this is the beauty of using our ink pads with our brushes to really add the layers and shades of color. You want to make sure as well that you keep water on your brush, because if it dries out, it's not going to have that smooth look on your card. Do a little bit in here and a little bit more down here. If you want, you can pick up some more water and just a little bit of that ink, and you can wash a little bit of that in and just work it in until you're happy with it, which I'm happy with that. I'm going to put that aside. And now I'm going to bring in some Bubble Bath, which of course is one of the colors in the Designer Series paper. And it's what makes the Stampin' Up! Products magical as far as color coordination goes. So I'm just squeezing my water painter onto my paper towel because I want to make sure I get all of that blue out before I go into my pink. Now I'm going to pick up some of that pink. Hard to see on the block, but it's there. And add it to my flower. And see, the Stays On doesn't bleed with the water, right? Which is excellent. We don't want it to bleed. Okay. Now I'm going to bring in the Mossy Meadow and do the same thing. And I'm just tapping my inks onto my blocks so that I can pick it up versus going directly onto the ink pad. Again, I need to add some water. Whoops, there was a lot of water, but that's okay. I just squeezed my brush and I'm going to tap it onto my paper towel so that I don't get too much water on this. Let's move this back in here. And add my greenery. I'm going to put some on here too, just add some nice, a little bit of shading to these sprigs. Whoops, see, I picked up too much water. I forgot to tap it on the paper towel, but that's fine because I'm going to be trimming that up anyways. And now, instead of going directly into this little bit that has most of the water, because I want some more intense color, I'm picking up ink that's over to the side, not right into the water, okay? And then you'll see, look how much darker that is. And I'm just lightly going up the center. I'm going to clean my brush, pick up a little bit of the ink that's in the water so that it's softer, and add some more. So now I have a light, a medium, and a dark green, all from the same ink pad. I'm not going to worry about the center of the flower because I'm going to put one of our embellishments on that. But I am going to bring the pink back in now that that's dried, and I'm going to pick up some more pink. First, make sure my brush is clean. I'm going to hold this up so you can see. I'm just going to dab on some of that darker pink. Can you see the variations? Right? So much fun. Makes us look and feel like artists when I can speak for myself. I am not. The stamps and the inks do it all for me. Okay, so once you're happy with that, it's time to cut. There is some fussy cutting in this class, which I personally have always found so relaxing. And I'm just taking my time and I'm just cutting in this section, right? Using that section of the scissors. I'm not going all the way down the length like this because I have more control when it's a smaller image like this. And I'm turning the paper around, not just using my scissors. So just take your time. And I'm leaving just a small amount of white around my image, which is something I'm not very good at usually. I usually cut too close to the black. And the thing about doing that is you sometimes cut away bits of the outline of the image that you don't really want to lose. So don't go too close. And this may look fiddly, this little part, but it's really not. I'm just going around. This is actually a really simple stamp to cut. And see how that green ink around that piece of greenery, that piece of leaf, really makes it stand out even though it's a solid black stamped image. Now it's up to you if you want to cut inside the handle I mean, you could use an X-Acto knife, and Stampin' Up also sells a piece that you can get that attaches to your Take Your Pick tool. I don't have one. If you want to cut that out, this is what I do. I bring in my piercing mat, and I'm just going to jab my scissors right in the center, just enough so that I can get my scissors in there and work it. So sometimes I do this in today's cards, and sometimes I don't. And I have sharper scissors. Just a second. These scissors are old. I've had them for years, and they're actually a little bit bent at the tips. So I'm bringing in a new pair that I actually got at a Stampin' Up event a few years ago, and look at the difference. Just watch. Perfect. These little tips on our paper snips are awesome. Teacup, cut and ready to go. And that's going to also get put on with Stampin' Dimensionals. I'm going to use 3. And this gets put on right here. Look how pretty. And then I'm going to take one of the smaller cork embellishments and put that right on the center of the flower. And then all that's left is the sentiment, which I'm going to emboss with gold. And the sentiment is cut with this die right here on some white. So again, those of you who got the kits will already have this cut for you. So let's take the embossing buddy and our sentiment. And stamp that with our first mark. Whoops. And this stamp, which has fur on it, stamp's a little crooked. I think it's how I put my label on. So hopefully it's not too crooked in today's video. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Let's grab my gold powder. See how that comes out. Oh, it looks pretty straight. And I do have a little bit of powder right over here where I don't want it. So I'm just going to take a dry paintbrush and just carefully swipe that away. And set that with the heat tool. Gold looks so pretty. And it's easy to read with the font. Sometimes, I don't know, for some reason, sometimes it's hard to read the sentiments when they're embossed in a metallic powder. But this is really easy to read. So pretty. Embossing has never grown old for me. I remember when I first discovered heat embossing was when I first discovered stamping when I was about 14 years old, which is like 40 years ago. And my mind was just blown. I could not believe the magic of heat embossing. And all these years later, I still just am thrilled when I, heat emboss something. I just think it's the coolest thing ever. All right, you saw me just put some dimensionals on, and somehow I've gotten this a little bit crooked. So before I do that, I'm going to take another glue dot. Okay, and I'm just going to pull it down using that glue dot to move it, and there we go. We've straightened out the ribbon. Okay, and then this little corner is going to get tucked behind this circle, just like so. So now the gold on the sentiment pulls in the gold on the ribbon, and there's that card done. So pretty. Exactly the same as the original. 2 beautiful cards. And in your kits, you have some paper. This is just computer paper that I use for my cards. And I just Sometimes I'll use my basic white for the inside of the card. But honestly, more often than not, I just use this and save my good white cardstock. Okay, you can use whatever kind of tape adhesive you want. I'm just using my Terran tape here. And that goes right on the inside. Card number 1 done. This is card number 2, and this card features this really pretty flower vase, but you notice there's no vase on this one because I wanted to show you a variation of how you can use that. Okay, so here are the bits and bobs for this card. The card base, as you can see, is wild wheat. All of the card bases are 5.5 by... Now all of the card bases in this class are 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4.25. So I've scored my wild wheat, and now I'm going to put on a piece of designer series paper. This is cut 4 by 5.25. It does have that pattern on it, so I want to make sure it is going the right direction. So you'll see I have my die cut already here. I'm going to show you how I did that because you need to use the 2 dies at one time. I'm going to put your paper, this is a 3.5 by 3.5 piece of paper. Then you put the bigger circle and then the one next size down. Okay, inside just like that, and run it through. This is what you end up with. The 2 circles, and then you get this piece, and of course we'll need to pop out all the little bits and pieces as well. Now if you were just to use this circle without this on the inside, you will get a different die cut. So the same size as this one, but of course this way you get that second row of dots and the inside cut. And I'm actually going to show you going the next size down. Same thing. I'm going to put the 2 together. Now we've got this and we have this. Notice we also have this. So if you cut just your panel, and like say 4 by 5.25, and you just want this circle on the inside, that's how you can do that. Now you can take this big die, put it on top like so, cut it out, and then you've got your outline like I did before. And of course I went a little bit too close to the edge there, but I don't worry about stuff like that. I would not throw that out because look, that's where my bow would go, or another circle. So these dies do so much. They do so much. So versatile. And while I have my die cutting machine out, I want to show you this one here, so you can see what it looks like. And also these ones, which we'll be using again on another card. The rectangles work the same way as the circles, so I won't show you those because I'm sure it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. But let's go ahead and cut these. These are not going to cut all the way through. These are just going to give you the pattern on your paper. Okay, so stinking cool. I love it. And while I have these out, I'm going to do the same thing with these 2, because then I've got these for my next card, because this is a step in a card where I do this with the Moody Mauve that I just did, as well as this Boho Blue. And that saves us a step coming up later. And of course, I'll just pop out all those dots with my little brush. So super, super versatile set of dies. And just, I mean, I didn't even show you the rectangles, right? Like, there's so much you can do with these dies. It's like crazy awesome. All right, let's get back to the card and we'll pull this one in. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue around the center. I'm not worried about the glue that's going to come through the holes because it's going to dry clear anyways. And there we go. Simple, right? Simple. Then I have my white already cut. Let's zoom in for you because we're going to do some more stamping. And this time we're going to stamp our flowers. Quite a good size stamp, really. All right, let's grab a block. What block? We'll use this one. This is block I. And I'm actually not going to stamp in StazOn for this one, actually, now that I'm thinking about this. Instead, we are going to stamp with Mossy Meadow. And I'm just inking up the top portion of the stamp. Okay. And just kind of line it up. Okay. Pull in some scrap paper and I'm going to stamp it again. It's more the leaves I'm going for this time around, so I'm actually just going to stamp it right here because I only need these leaves there. Now I'm going to clean my stamp. I'm just bringing in my mister, sprayed it on the one side and dry it on the other. Make sure that's clear. Now I'm going to ink this flower and this flower and this flower is what I'm going for now. So I'm going to stamp it twice, but I really only need that big flower the second time. Okay, so there's my bits and pieces. Now I'm going to bring in my blender pen. And if you've never used a blender pen, they are pretty magical because they will just pull the color in that you've just stamped. So you can see I'm just pulling in that green, right? And I'm going to go back and forth until it's clean. Now I could do the same thing on these and pull in that Moody Mauve, but I want some of that bubble bath in there, some of that lighter pink. So I'm going to bring my block back in. Tap that down. And I'm going to pick that up with my blending pen. And I'm just going to start adding it in. And it will pull in some of that Moody Mauve. But if you notice, I'm starting in the white and then working my way up to the outline. That way I can really get that bubble bath in there. Okay, and do the same thing here, and that is going to pull some of that Moody Mauve in there a bit, but I'm tipping my brush into that bubble bath just to add some deeper shades of that color. Now you could use your marker direct onto your paper, but I find using a marker, like if I were just to use my bubble bath, it would be a lot more intense than using my blender pen. Plus, not everybody has, you know, all the markers. So if you have a blender pen and your ink pads, you can basically create a marker with all of your ink pads. Now I'm going to bring in my wild wheat and bring this piece in. I'm going to add wild wheat to the little flowers here, so I'm just dabbing it on carefully because I don't want these flowers to be green, so I'm just literally dabbing my blender pen with that color right on there. Go back and forth with my blender pen on my scrap paper until that ink comes out clean, and now I'm going to pull that green into these leaves just like I did on that other one. I'm going to do it for all of them. If you want to, you can go down the stem. Same thing here, you can pull some of that green in just to fill in some of that space. If you want to, you can go into your green and dip your blender pen right into the ink pad if you want it to be more intense. See how that just adds that intense color, but I'm not losing the outline even though I stamped in that green. Right? Just filling it in a little bit here and there just to add a variation of that green. I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm tapping my blender pen into the ink pad and then tapping it onto my scrap paper so that the blender pen's not fully loaded, because I don't want to lose the outline of my leaves. Okay, go back and forth until it comes out clear. And now fussy cutting again. Okay, we'll start with the leaves. Simple to cut, and you don't have to do this part with the leaves, but it really does make a difference on the card when you have that little bit of pop-up dimension. Just a fun little detail that does make a difference. I'm not going to do this little itty bitty guy, but you can if you want. So we have our 2 leaves there. And then my flower. There's those, and now these little ones. See, really easy. This is not a hard step. Very easy, relaxing to do. Now, if you have your markers in these colors, you can use your markers directly to your stamp and add your color that way. And I will actually show you an example of that in a second. This card class could have easily have been a 7-8 card class with all the ideas that I had. But there's so many ways you can use your stamps. All right, ready for the magic. I'm going to dab a little bit of glue on these flowers, and this is going to get completely covered. So I'm just going to move that glue in with the tip of my applicator. Let's put these on first. So this is like paper piecing, which we're going to do in another card, except we're doing it with our stamped images, right? And then this one just gets lined up directly on top of that. So this way we have the green stems and the green leaves instead of black for our flowers, right? Now, I'm gonna go ahead and pop this onto my card before I come to these other ones that we've cut out. Make sure it's straight. Okay. Now I'm bringing in my flower and the 2 leaves that I have cut, and I am going to add some dimension using my Take Your Pick tool. I'm bringing in this piece next on my Take Your Pick tool to add some dimension. So I have my piercing mat down, and I'm just going to push into the center of my flower, and I'm actually going to flip these over, and I'm just going to kind of rock back and forth, and look, they're just going to start adding dimension. Now I'm going to flip them over, and I'm going to go do that. I'm just going to push right on the tips. So this is really fun. Now I have 2 Take Your Pick tools, obviously, because I use all the ends all the time. So instead of having to switch them out, I do like to have them ready and to go. So now I'm taking this one, and I'm just going to bend over my petals. Okay. Bend my petals, and then I can take this one again and push it in if I need to. and just work it until you're happy with it. Okay. And then we're going to add these to the card with a little bit of glue. So I'm just going to put a little glue in the center here, a little bit of glue down here, and a little bit of glue right here. So let's start with this small leaf. We're just going to put it right here, and I'm going to just push it down on the glue. Now if you want, you can, look at that, right? So you can move it down a little bit, right? Isn't that amazing how you just get all that extra dimension? It's very similar to paper towel, right? And I'm doing the same thing here. Just pushing the edge right into that glue. Pull it down. And then this one. Now this one, I'm not going to line it up as precisely. I'm going to move it so that you'll see what I mean. Just a second. I want to move it so that, there we go, right? So that I have those other petals peeking through the gaps of that flower. Like, how fun. How fun. I'm gonna take my little mini cork and pop that right in. Now, of course, you could use pearls or other gems, but I will say I'm really loving the cork because it just keeps with that natural vibe with the color palette we're using. All that's left is a sentiment and the bow. So I already have my bow made, so I'm going to put that on with the glue dot, and I'm going to put it right here, so that's going to hide that partial part of the vase that has been cut off. And then I'm going to use a glue dot to hold down my ribbon where I want it to stay put. And then I like to take my Take Your Pick tool and go in the center of that bow and then just push and fluff it up a little bit. Do the same thing over here. Add a little glue dot. Put my Take Your Pick tool in. Fluff it. Fluff and push. Okay. And then if you want, you could add glue dots to hold those down, which I am going to do that. One right here. And of course I got cat fur in there, which I don't want. This sentiment, I am going to use two stamps actually, because I want to show you how you can, like I mentioned in my introduction, how you can manipulate the stamps a little bit and use them a little bit different. So I'm going to stamp You Make Every Day a Little Bit Brighter, as well as Wishing You So Much Joy on This Special Day. And I'm going to stamp those both with Lost Lagoon. Even though there is not Lost Lagoon in this paper pattern, is just a pretty color, just to add that fun pop of color. So let's pull this in. I'm going to stamp that right there. Smudged that U a little bit, so I'm going to have to restamp that. Now I just want Special Day, so I'm just going to trim out Special Day from that first stamp. Cut out Every Day and We're gonna cut out the You Make. And now we have a sentiment that's not even in the kit. You Make Every Day a Special Day. And I'm going to put them in a different spot on this card, and I'm going to use dimensional. So I just need a tiny little sliver for the You Make. My original card, I just glued them on, so I'll show you that in a second. Every day. And then I think we can maybe use a full dimensional on this one. A special day. You can see how I did it differently here, where I added some glue and dimensionals. Isn't that fun? Moving on to card number 3. This would make a beautiful Easter card. So pretty and very, very simple to do. So we have our bubble bath card base, and we have our moody mauve cardstock with the mossy meadow. I have already run my Whisper White, basic white cardstock through the die, and then I have a piece of Designer Series paper that I have torn. Now, for this card, just cut out following along those dots. Like, how cool is that? So I'm making my own custom trim from my card, and this would be so pretty on scrapbook pages and projects. So I'm just literally following along. Couldn't be easier, and I just love how this looks. Okay. I'm going to take my Moody Mauve next. I'm going to put a piece of tear and tape just along the bottom. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and put it on the top as well. Okay. Peel this off. And then I'm just going to line this up. Now you can line it up above these top dots, or you can line it up down below. Completely up to you. I think I might go down a little bit further just to show you the difference compared to the original card. So I'm just using those dots to help me position. See? And you can see how I've got like the full triangle here versus just that line, right? Versatile. I love versatility when it comes to my products and just being able to use them so many different ways. So I'm just trimming off that excess. And now I'm going to peel this off. So this strip of Designer Series paper, all I did is I just tore it down. You want to tear towards yourself so you get that really nice ruffly edge. And I'm just going to put that up here, and it was just to pull in the color that I'm going to be using on the nest. Again, trim off any excess as you need to. And then this is going to get put on my card. Just like so. Okay. Now I'm going to add my mossy meadow. I am just truly loving these color combinations. So pretty. And that looks so crooked down here, so I have to, this is why I like using the glue. This is why I like using the glue. I can reposition there much better. Now I'm bringing in a piece of Designer Series paper. This measures 1 inch by 5 1/4, and I'm just going to fishtail the one end. So I've just gone straight up the center and then corner to the center and corner to the center. If you have a punch or a die you want to do this part on, you can. That's just how I like to make them. And I'm going to glue this on. Okay, now on my original card I used this image and stamped it before I glued this panel on and embossed it in gold because I wanted to pull out some of the gold from this ribbon. I didn't do it on this card because I want you to see the difference. So that's a totally optional step. Oh, and I forgot to put my ribbon on here. So let's go ahead and do that. Remember that little piece that I was saving from earlier? We're gonna put that on now. Again, this is why I love the glue so much. So forgiving. Okay, so I'm just gonna pop that on, wrap it around, and glue it down. So do that before, wrap this around before you glue this onto your panel. And I'm going to take a glue dot and tuck it underneath just to really get that to stay put. Circle I'm going to use on this card looks like that thicker circle die. And we're going to stamp our nest. And I'm using my StazOn. I love the smell of StazOn. It smells like almond extract to me. It always has. Okay. So pretty. Now one thing I should mention is if you're using StazOn, make sure you have StazOn cleaner. And this will clean that ink off your stamps because StazOn is not a water-based ink. It is a solvent ink. So this is the best way to clean your stamps if you're using StazOn. And why am I using a paper towel when I have my handy dandy scrub? Gets right in there. Look at that. I love these things. They just make your crafting so much easier. Okay, time to color. So I'm going to bring my boho blue in. Tap it on my block. And we're going to use some of the wild wheat. And we are going to use some mossy meadow. Actually, let's just tap it onto this one. Okay. Perfect. All right. Ready to rock and roll. Squeeze my water painter, get the water out. Okay, and I'm going to start with my blue first. So let me move this in so you can see. Squeeze till you get some water. There we go. Blend it in. Just kind of let some of that water off on your paper towel and do a light wash. And I'm leaving a little bit of white on my eggs. Now I'm picking up a little bit of ink right next to the water because I want a little bit more color, not as much watery down. You see the difference? Playing with your inks and your water painters just takes time, but it is so gratifying. It's one of my favorite. It's always been one of my favorite ways to color my images. See? Just work it in. So fast, so easy. I want to add a little bit of ink in here. So I'm going to zoom in a bit for you guys. And a little bit more blue. It's a little bit too much blue. There we go. It's just a little bit too stark white for me. So it's always better to go with a lighter hand when it comes to your ink and go in and add and shade as you desire. Always good idea to let it dry and then come back to it and see how you like it. Okay, next up is the wild wheat. So I'm squeezing until I have a nice drop of water in there. See, drop coming down. There we go. Dab it onto my paper towel, and I'm literally going to do a wash around the entire nest. Okay. Go right around those eggs, my little robin eggs. Leaving a little bit of white. Now I'm going to go into my ink, and I'm only picking up just a little bit of that water, and I'm going inside the nest. Now do you see how I got that shading? Using the same ink. Okay, and now I'm just going to go around the nest using just a little bit of water and a little bit of ink, but this way I get those shades of wild wheat. And I'm going to do some of these little off sprigs as well. Okay, easy. Just takes practice, takes time to learn how to use the water and the inks, but it is magical. Look at those shades. All from the one ink pad. Okay, now I'm going into my green. I'm squeezing my water painter until I get a drop of water coming out. There we go. Work that in. Get some of that water off. And now I'm going to color in my leaves. And of course you can stamp this and then die cut it, which is ordinarily what we would do. But when I'm doing a class and people are receiving, you know, die cuts, already die cut, I like to work with the same bits and pieces that everybody else has. But ordinarily I would, if I had the, you know, my own supplies, I would stamp, color, and then die cut. So you'll notice now I'm pulling in some green just by swiping some onto the nest. Okay, I'm just swiping back and forth just to add a little bit of green here and there. Don't want to lose my yellow and the different shades that I have. Okay. If you want to, you can go back in, pick up some of that yellow. See right here, I want there, see? Look at that. That's what I mean. You can go back in and add as much or as little as you want with your color. Gorgeous. Okay, I'm gonna zap that with my heat tool because it is damp and I want it to be dry before I put it onto my card. You'll notice when it dries as well that some of those colors mute a little bit. So this is where if you wanted to add some more blues or, you know, different colors, do it once it's dry, because that's when it's dry is when you're going to see the final look after adding that water. Okay, dimensionals. Now I'm going to use the Baker corks on this card. So I'm going to put one here and two on the other side. Adds great dimension to this card and pulls in the natural look. All that's left is a sentiment. So I am going to use the You Make Every Day a little bit brighter with my Stays On ink. And here's the original. And again, I did stamp a little bit on the top to add that gold. So you could absolutely do that if that's a look that you like. but I didn't do it on this one, so you could see the difference. And again, don't forget, let me zoom out just a bit. You can see the difference from where I cut along this die cut, right? I absolutely love these dies. I'm going to be using it so often. This will be perfect for like Valentine's cards and Valentine's projects. I just have so many ideas for using just this die alone, let alone all the other ones. Card number 4, easy peasy, with some paper piecing. So if you've never used the paper piecing technique, you're in for a treat. It's pretty fantastic. So let's pull out the bits and pieces. So I have a piece of Designer Series paper cut at 4 by 5 1/4. And then what I did is I took this die, which is the largest rectangle die, and I put it on and I ran it through my machine, which gave me this piece cut out, right? And we are simply going to flip that over and glue it on the inside. So easy, easy, easy. Add our glue. And this could be a landscape or portrait card. Okay. This piece gets glued inside. Okay. And then, if you recall, at the beginning of this class, I ran those 2 dies, these right here, I ran them through on this paper, right? This is where they're going to come into play. So let me grab this and get all those little dots out. And all I'm going to do is cut them out. So you could use the paper trimmer for this part. I'm not going to. I'm just going to cut them out, leave a little bit of an edge on each end. It was fun coming up with different ways to use these dies, because at first I wasn't really sure how I wanted to incorporate them onto the cards in this class, but boy, I tell you, once I got going, I just had so many fun ideas. So there's that cut, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it on a slant on both ends, and I'm going to do that with all 4 pieces. Need our ribbon as well. So I actually have some ribbon right here. So I'm just going to cut that in half. Alright, so this is going to be landscape. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take one of each. I'm actually going to save these for another card. On my original card, I used all 4 pieces, but now that I made the one, I realized I only need 1. So I'm going to cut them both in half. And I'm going to cut 4 pieces of ribbon. So again, I only need little strips. This is a great way to use little bits of ribbon, and I'm going to just cut an end of each one on a slant as well. My tear and tape in, and I'm going to put a little strip on each end. We'll start on this side first, and I'm going to put a little bit of ribbon in the middle. Then I'm going to take my blue, put that here, and then my Moody Mauve, and then do the same thing on this side. Don't have to be perfectly lined up, so don't worry about that. Okay, so now we have 2 more pieces of ribbon, and I'm going to overlap them on the center here. I'm taking a glue dot, and I'm going to put a glue dot on top of each of those ribbons. And again, this was just a fun way of me trying to figure out how to use up these little leftover bits. And I'm just putting these on a bit of a diagonal, just like so. And we can trim them up as we go along. But then even if you have little tiny pieces and you don't have enough to go straight across, well, look it, no one's gonna know, because this is going to go right here. And look, you have all those fun bits popping out on each side. Now it's time to do some stamping on my circle die. So this is the smallest die here. And then we've got this die next. I'm going to pull in my StazOn for both of them. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the small one, which is wishing you so much joy on this special day. And I'm just going to stamp it right on here. It may not look like it's going to fit, but it does. Look at that. And now I'm going to stamp my teapot, or my teacup rather, on this circle, as well as on a scrap piece of designer series paper. So I'm using this pattern. So ink this up really, really good. And stamp it down. Okay, I'm going to bring in my Moody Mauve, and this time, instead of using the water painter, I'm going to use my blender pen to color. So I'm just dipping this right into my ink pad. Don't want it super, super dark, so I'm going to go on the side, and I'm just, well, it's dark. That's okay. We'll do dark around the edges, and then pull that in. And because it's so dark on that one edge, I want it to be dark on the other as well. Okay, that's good. Back and forth. I still have some ink on this block, so I'm going to pick some of that up, tap it down, and I'm just working on the bottoms of the leaves and then pulling that green out so that I get the 2 shades. This side needs a little bit more green. There we go. Okay, and now I'm taking my wild wheat, and I'm just going to do the little bit of the rim and inside the cup. And we're going to do this little bit as well. And now we're going to cut out the teapot. So we don't need the flower. So I'm just going to go, I'm just going right inside. Okay, I want to keep this little portion here, but I don't need that flower, so I'm just going to cut that out. Now it's up to you if you want to keep that handle in or just keep it where I've colored it. I'm actually, you know what, I'm going to cut that handle right off just so you can see the difference from my original. Okay, I'm going to cut this leaf out. And then I'm going to go over here and cut this leaf out. Now if you want, you can stamp your leaves with your flowers and glue them on top of this instead of this step. So there's no right or wrong, this is just how I've done it. So this is what I have left. That's what's going to get glued onto my teacup. Before I glue on the piece that we've just cut, I'm going to take my water painter, pick up some of that boho blue that's on my block, and I'm just going to go straight across and add a little bit of color so that my little teacup is standing on something. It's not just floating in the air. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in my glue, and I'm going to be careful not to go on top of my my leaves, and right over here. And of course I could put my glue right behind my designer series paper, but I'm just going to do it this way. Okay, and then this just goes right on top. Look at that magic. Now I have a beautiful China pattern, right? And I wanted to show you the difference of just coloring the handle versus cutting it out like I did here. So if you wanted to keep the whole pattern, because this is white on white, you wouldn't have to cut out that center little bit that's really fussy for the handle, and it would be fine. But look at the difference. So fun. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is ready to get put on my card with some dimensionals. I just want to show you before I put this on. See, you could absolutely do this portrait. You could absolutely do this in portrait, right? Versus the landscape. So, and alternatively, I can put my sentiment down here as opposed to where I put it up on top. So you can really play around with these designs and make them your own. So I'm going to put this right here, and I'm going to glue this on. And I'm going to put this down here this time. Right about there. Bring in my embellishments and pop one on. So it's really fun having a little bit of ribbon peeking through, and I actually think this one's a little bit too long, so I'm going to trim that up a bit. Oops, except it's not slanted. There we go. But it's fun to have that little bit of texture in amongst your paper. I love the paper piecing. It's just such a fun technique. Moving on to card number 5. As you can see, I have used the flower image again, but I've used it differently. And before I show you that, I know I had mentioned about using markers direct to stamp. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for you right now. So if I wanted to use my markers, I'm going to use the same colors as my ink pads. I'm going to start with my Mossy Meadow on the leaves. And this has always been one of my favorite ways to use my stamps and markers. Now, if you're new to stamping, when you're using our Stampin' Write markers, work the marker from the side versus using the very tip, because you don't want to ruin that tip. So I'm just going right on top of all my leaves. You can use multiple shades of colors. If I wanted to, I could have gone over this with Old Olive first and then highlighted it with my darker Mossy Meadow, so you can get 2 tones, which is really beautiful. And now I'm going to pull in my wild wheat and just go on these little flowers. I'm bringing in my Moody Mauve next for these flowers here. And I'll also do the same over here. Okay. And now for the vase, I'm going to use my Lost Lagoon. Okay. By now, a lot of that ink has already dried on my stamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to huff on it, and the moisture from my breath will re-moisten this ink. And I'm just using this die cut that I already have. I'm going to stamp it right down and wait for the magic. Look how beautiful that is. If you wanted to, you could take your blender pen, make sure it's clean, and you can pull that color in that you've just stamped down using your marker. Clean it and then pull that ink in. It's very soft, beautiful look. Always clean your blending pen before you go into the next color. And then I'm going to pull some of this blue in. So simple and so beautiful. Okay, so that's just a little something different that I wanted to share with you. I'm going to clean my stamp and move on to this card. So to start, I have a piece of basic white. This measures 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm going to do some heat embossing. So I'm going to ink this with my Versamark, and I'm going to stamp it 3 times, and I want my flowers to go on a curve. So I'm going to stamp it right up on top like this, ink it again, and I'm right over here stamping right on top of where that vase was, but that's going to get covered up with my die. So I've stamped it 3 times. You'll see it better when I put my embossing powder on top. If you do not have embossing powders or a heat tool, you can do this with your black and then just color it in. And I forgot to rub this with my embossing buddy first, which is why I have powder where I don't want it because of the static on the paper. So I'm just going to take a dry brush and brush off any excess powder that I don't want. With my heat tool, you're embossing, just turn your paper in the light, different directions, so you make sure you've got all that powder melted. Now it's time to add some color, again using my inks and my water painter. Now if you wanted to, you could use your ink refills. I'll just put a little dab right here, and that will last you, these little refills, dab like that on a block, pretty much enough to do all of the cards in this class. So I'm just getting my water going on my water painter. I want to get a nice, there we go. So we'll start with the green first, and all I really have to do is just dab it in the lines of the embossing, because that raised embossing is going to hold that ink of water inside, and it creates a beautiful effect. Now again, some of this, like down here, is going to get covered with the sentiment, but I'm just going to color all of the images. Like this piece here is going to get covered, but I'm going to color it anyways. That way I can make sure no matter where I put my sentiment, anything peeking through is going to show through. So some of this has overlapped, like up here. That's fine. Just go ahead, color that in. And I'm just barely touching the paper, just letting that ink and water tap inside the embossed images. If you want to, you can add a swipe of ink where you've got these solid leaves and the stems, which I like to do. You don't have to, but I do like it. But that's the beauty of when you're creating your cards and projects. You do you. You do what you like best. Okay. Now I'm going to go in with my green, and I'm not using as much water this time, and I'm just going to tap it again just to get the different shades. So I'm not coloring in the whole leaf here, I'm just literally tapping it so you get the different tones of green. Clean my brush, and I'm going to go into my wild wheat. Again, just waiting for the water to come out. And I'm going to do these little berries, these little flowers I should say. I'm going to add some water to this ink refill. Oops, that was a lot of water. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit, dab it on my paper towel, and just tap it into my flowers. And you're going to do this for the whole picture. While I have the water still wet in those flowers, I'm going to pick up some ink and just tap it on and just let it dry naturally, and you're going to get the different darker and lighter colors. Easier to see with the bigger flowers than it is the leaves. Clean it. See, I only needed a tiny bit of ink, right? You don't need much. I'm going to bring in my Moody Mauve, pick some of that up, and do the same thing. Add my water, pick it up, wash it on. And again, I'm just tapping it. And I'm working kind of quickly because I do want to add some more ink while that water is still on the paper. Okay, I'm going to pick up some of that ink and just drop it in. See? And when you tap it, you're going to get those different colors. Any little bits of white that's showing, I'm filling that in as well. Okay, and I don't have to do the vase because that's going to get covered. And look how sensational that is. And of course, that needs to dry. So while that's drying, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment with Mossy Meadow because that is the color of the card base. I am stamping wishing you so much joy on this special day, and this is going to be perfect for birthdays, anniversaries, all kinds of different occasions. Now I have my die cut with my Moody Mauve, and I'm going to put my sentiment on with some dimensionals. I told you we're using a lot of dimensionals in today's card class. There's just something about having your sentiments and different pieces on your cards popped up. They make such a difference. And look at, we got one little dot here we don't want. There we go. Put that on. So there's our sentiment piece done. Set that aside. I am bringing in my boho blue, and I am just going to sponge around the edges. So I like to work my ink off on my paper first, and I actually think I'm going to re-ink my ink pad. Always recommend getting re-inkers for your ink pads. That way, if your ink pads dry out or if your ink retires, you will always be able to use that ink pad. Okay, So that's gonna be really wet, see? Let's just work that in. There we go, look at the difference. Okay, I'm just gonna work that onto the edges of my card. Now I'm bringing in my crumb cake, and there's a little stamp in this set that needs some lovin's in today's cards, and that's this one right here. I'm just going to stamp that on with some crumb cake. And I'm turning my stamp around in different directions, going off the paper as well. I'm going to stamp some right there. And next, this gets glued onto my Mossy Meadow card base. This is going to get put on with dimensionals. And look at it, hides where those vases were, and so you have your flowers going right around. Like, I just think that is so fun. And then next, I'm gonna add a bow. And I'm just gonna put the bow a little bit tilted. And you know me, I like to add my glue dots to hold my bows down just where I want them. And these fun little cork pieces, and put them in the center of the big flowers. First card, I colored the bigger flowers in with the wild wheat, and the smaller flowers with the moody mauve, so you can see the difference. I also added a lot more sponging on this card, so you can see the variation that you can get depending on how you want to add your colors. I also did not stamp the little 3 dots on this one that I did on this one, and I really like the dots, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. They just add a little something something, and honestly, I never even thought about it when I was making this card. Definitely easier to do before you add the sentiment. I think I'm gonna add a little one right there. Look at the difference. Love that. All right, my friends, we are down to the last card, and I hope you've been having fun making these cards and enjoying the designs. This one was really, really fun to do, and it uses a super cool technique using up the bits of designer series paper that you probably have from making today's card. These are the pieces that I'm using on today's card. I'm using Mossy Meadow again for the card base. And then I have a piece of basic white. This one is cut at 4 by 5 1/4, as is this one, because this is going to go on the inside as well. And then I have another piece of cardstock. This is the wild wheat, but you can use any color. And this measures 4 1/4 by 3 1/2. I have my die cuts already done. I also have a piece of vellum, which is the same die cut as this one. The next step requires some embossing, and I'm using the Countryside Blossoms embossing folder for this. My original card, the first card that I made, uses an embossing folder that has since retired, I do believe, because I'm not seeing it in the catalogs. So we're going to use this one today. And I'm going to emboss my 4 by 5 1/4 basic white. So I'm just making my sandwich with my 2 plates and run that through. Then the next step is putting another piece of 4 by 5 1/4 basic white on top of my card base. So this basic white is going to be the inside of the front flap. I'm putting the largest of the circle dies on top of that. And I want to make sure I have space on the bottom for my sentiment. So this is going to be the bottom right here. So put my plate on and run that through. Now, when I go to glue that onto the inside of my flap, it's going to line up perfectly. The next step is I want to emboss this cutout flap. I'm going to take these out, put this into my embossing folder, and I'm lining it up along the crease here. Okay, and I'm going to just fold it under like so. Make my little sandwich with my plates and run it through. If you do your embossing before you do your die cutting, you're going to lose your embossing because you're going to flatten it out. So now we have our embossed cover, and then this piece is going to fit perfectly inside when we glue that on. Right, I'm bringing in my 4.5 by 3.5 cardstock and an adhesive sheet. So I'm just going to peel that off and just position this right on top. I'm going to take my bone folder, make sure I've got it on there really, really well. I'm going to peel this off. Okay, so I've now got my cardstock covered with adhesive. So I'm pulling in my scrap pieces of Designer Series papers. Now I had some extras of these, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim them down a bit. And they can be all different widths. But you do kind of want to work with straight edges. Okay, and I have this piece left over from my paper piecing on my teacup. So cut some of that down. All right, I think that's going to give me plenty to work with. Okay, this is so fun. I've always loved this technique. So I'm just going to start covering this. And you can go in different directions, and you just want to make sure your pieces are flush. Okay. So much fun. You can go all one direction, you can go different directions. Look, we've got this, so I'm actually going to trim that down. I want quite a bit of that color. That on there. We'll put this one on here. And you just keep filling it in however you wish. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting a little bit of all the different patterns. And we'll go that way. Okay, now before we carry on, I'm going to trim off these excess bits because some of these longer pieces I can use. These little ones probably not, but I'll have them if I need them. Okay, now I'm putting the largest circle die and the next largest circle die on top of this, and I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. And I'm going to go back a couple of times because it's cutting through Designer Series paper as well as the cardstock as well as the adhesive layer. Looks like a quilt, doesn't it? I just love it so much. So I'm going to put this aside because I don't need this piece for this card. I can use this for a different card, which I will show you after this one what I did with my piece on my first card. So this is what we need next. Okay, I'm bringing in my embossed piece. This is going to get glued on the inside of my card. And I think I'm going to put the raised side down and the debossed side up just for a change. There we go. And now I'm going to put glue behind here. Now, note, I'm not worrying about punching out all those little holes. Those little holes are going to stay in there because of that adhesive that I put on. So I'm going to close my card front and then just tuck this inside the circle. And press it down. Okay, so then when you open it up, this is what you have. Fun, right? And this is going to get hidden with our stamped part. So now I'm going to glue this in. I like to go from the front just to make sure, yes, it's lined up. The stamping is going to be done on the 1st of March. So I'm going to stamp with my stays on and cut my nest really, really well. I'm going to stamp it right onto my vellum. Okay. And I'm going to zap that with the heat tool to make sure all that ink is dry. I'm going to color on the reverse side of this. Now I could color on the front, but I want it to be muted and soft, so I'm going to color on the reverse. And I'm going to start by pulling in my block that has the wild wheat, the boho blue, and the mossy meadow. And we're going to color it the exact same way that we did on the first card. So I'm going to pick up some of that blue and just color in my eggs. I'm going to put some more water down. There we go. And you can add some more blue where the shading is. I'm going to add my wild wheat. Because it's vellum, this is not going to dry right away. So I'm going to zap this with the heat tool in between adding my shading and extra colors. You could also use the blender pen with your ink pads. You can use markers. All right. Add some more wild wheat. Go inside the nest where I want it to be darker. Okay, and I'm going to pull in some pecan pie next. I'm going to put a little bit of that on a block, and I'm going to add some of that to the nest. I'm going to start by going inside. And if your vellum starts to curl, just heat it up again. Some of those sprigs that are coming outside of the nest. Okay. I want some more of that pecan pie in the center of the nest. And now I'm going to go in with my mossy meadow, and I've cleaned my brush on my paper towel. So I'm going to go in where the leaves are. And just like we did on the first one, add some green in around the nest. I really like these shades together. Now that that's dry, I'm going to turn it over and dry it again, which will help flatten it out. I want want to show you how beautiful this is using that watercolor technique on the vellum. Isn't that gorgeous? Now this is going to look even different in a second because I'm going to glue this onto my white, and then look at how everything pops up. Holy moly, I just love it. Okay, so I'm going to put some glue on here. Now, I want this to be completely covered in glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my silicone mat. And I think I need just a teeny bit more glue here and there. And then I'm going to use some scrap paper. These got stuck together. So I'm just going to smush it all around. You can use a sponge if you like. You really want to make sure it's completely covered with glue. Get those edges. Now on a clean spot on this silicone mat, I am just going to line up my dots onto my die, and I'm just going to gradually push this on because I don't want any bubbles. And there's my completed piece. Bring this in, and this is going to get put on with dimensionals. And I'm using a lot of dimensionals on this one because I just want this to stay on as flat as possible. With that watercoloring on the vellum, it did of course curl, right? So I want it to stay as flat as possible on this white die cut. Oh my gosh, I just love how this looks. So this is going to get put right on the center. That's how it looks when the card is closed and open. Time to add the sentiment, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment with Versamark and emboss it in gold. And I'm going to stamp it onto this die cut. I'm using Overjoyed for you with your new journey. And I didn't use my embossing buddy, very important. You can use a static, a dryer sheet if you don't have one of these. To me, this sentiment, Overjoyed for you in this new journey with the nest, to me is perfect for a new mom. That's what I was thinking about when I made this, but it could also be something, you know, like a new nest egg or something going on in your life, a new career, who knows. But it's a very versatile sentiment, which I love. So you can see I've just added some tear and tape here, and I'm going to pull in some ribbon. And I'm just going to put a little bit of ribbon here. Trim that up over here. And I'm going to put a second piece on sort of at a diagonal. So I'm only going to put a little bit on, just like that. Again, it's all about just adding some texture. And of course, with the beautiful gold on this ribbon, it adds that little extra bit of glimmer. So see, I'm just... Whoops, I'm getting butterfingers. Here we go. Trim that. And you guessed it, Stampin' Dimensionals for the sentiment. Put that on right like so. Now I'm going to add some cork embellishments, and to me this is very old school. This reminds me back in the day when I started stamping and we would put eyelets and different things like this, but it just adds a little something, balances out with, you know, the eye, and adds that extra texture and just something fun, right? Now if you wanted to, you can see where I embossed "Wishing You So Much Joy," cut it out and glued it on the inside. So that's something else you can do if you choose to. Again, a whole different look because it's going to depend on the scrap papers that you're using when you're doing this technique. Oh my gosh, it's such a fun technique. I just can't get over how beautiful this is with the watercolor look on that vellum. So gorgeous. And of course, watercolor cardstock with this would be so super pretty too. All right, you guys, that is 6 cards. Are you guys tired of hearing my voice? I kinda am. Now, if you recall, when I made this card today, I had this bit left over, and I wanted to show you what I did when I made my original card using this bit. And this is a bonus tutorial in this class. This is how I used this round circular piece on this fun fold card. And then I added some more designer series paper, and I did a little paper piecing and some fussy cutting. Really, really fun. Some more die cuts. So that is how I used that leftover piece. Well, friends, that was a lot of stamping in today's class. Let's pull in the cards that we've made. This was card number 1. Let me zoom out because I don't think they're all going to fit. And then we had, I think this was the second one that we made. And then we have this one. We have that one. This one. And then lastly, we had this one. And then my bonus card tutorial. So this is not in the demonstration for this video, but it is part of the PDF tutorial. So I hope you really got a lot of great inspiration and ideas out of this card class. This is such a versatile and fun bundle, and I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I really appreciate you purchasing this class, and I hope you have a lot of fun with these layouts. Thanks so much, my friends. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Take care and happy stamping.